very large switch of the delta, right? So we see a very, very large switch of the delta. We go from a massive negative delta to then a massive positive delta, because if we look at the number just above this, we get 156 for 327. So we have double the amount of aggressive buyers than aggressive sellers after this absorption down here. So we have seen an absorption down here. We've seen an absorption of sellers, which means that the sellers have failed. Buyers are in control. That's what gives us the indication to take buys from within this candle, right? Within this region. That's kind of the first trade you could have taken. Now, the second trade comes from this area, which is even more interesting. I love this. Now, this was the area, this was the fair value gap. This was the fair value gap candle over here, all right? So let's dissect how price actually behaved over here. And it's super interesting. This candle, and this candle. Now, if we look at it again from an order flow perspective, from a candlestick perspective, you don't really know what's happening over here. You just know you see a large rally. But when we dive into these candles even further, using the power of volume and more importantly, the delta, what we see over here is we see, again, a lot of aggressive selling coming into this fair value gap. And we see a ton of aggressive selling. The same thing on the next candle. We see a ton of aggressive selling over here. We see a ton of aggressive selling. In fact, we see 42 for 0. So think about what that means. 42 aggressive sellers came into this area. There were no aggressive buyers. Despite there being no aggressive buyers, the market still pumped up. So when there's no buyers and the market pumps up, this is a very, very strong indication that the market is being controlled by buyers. Because when there's only aggressive sellers, and aggressive sellers are hitting the market at live conditions, right? They're hitting the markets at those prices. So this is ES. Price was hitting at around 61.50 level, 61.51 area. There was a ton of activity all towards the downside. None of those aggressive sellers were actually rewarded. That is what gives you the indication to take buys. On top of that, if you look at the reaction candle over here, we had 5 for 0, which means the volume was tiny. We only had 5 transactions, which is a tiny volume. When you have a tiny volume, from the last session we went over, price isn't really interested in those areas. And that is why the markets move up in the first place, right? Because when there's a lack of volume, the markets will only move up and down. So you want to pair volume with the delta. When you see aggressive sellers and hence a negative delta with a low volume and price isn't going down, this just means buyers are in control. And it all comes from reading two numbers, which is the reason why I push order flow very heavily, because it is essentially the backbone behind every strategy. Right, and that's essentially the reason to taking longs. You could have taken longs roughly from this area if you missed this, and you could have taken longs from about the 52 area all the way